Love forms the central theme of religions, cultures, and great ethical traditions around the world. Everywhere, we admire those who give of themselves freely and unselfishly. In that case, what does science say about altruism, love, and human survival? Hello, and welcome to Matter and Beyond. I'm your host, Laura Wells. On this episode, we'll meet Dr. Stephen G. Post, a professor and associate director in the Department of Bioethics at Case Western Reserve University. He's also a leading consultant on family caregiving and the ethics of Alzheimer's treatment. Dr. Post is especially interested in the study of altruism and compassionate love, which he explores in the context of science, moral philosophy, and religion. Long preoccupied with the negative side of human nature, says Post, science has only just begun to study what he calls our unlimited capacity for goodness. Please join us now on Matter and Beyond as we take a look at some of the ideas Dr. Stephen Post has on the nature of selfless love.
Dr. Post was born and raised in the town of Babylon on the south shore of Long Island, 50 miles east of New York City. His early years were spent close to the water, where he was an active sailor and earned money harvesting clams in Great South Bay. An avid reader, he found the long days out on the water ideal for meditation and reflection on things he had read about. He attended St. Paul's, an Episcopal high school in New Hampshire, where he was influenced by an African-American minister, Dr. John Walker, a man greatly interested in ideas about divine love and the theology of love as practiced in the African-American tradition by Martin Luther King Jr. and other great leaders of the civil rights movement. In college, Dr. Post's interest turned to biology as he sought to understand how species develop altruistic abilities and how human beings develop a capacity for empathy, attentive listening, compassion, and love, which he came to think of as our distinguishing marks as a species. After graduation, Dr. Post focused mainly on research work in pediatric endocrinology at the University of Pennsylvania and then at Cornell University, with a special interest in the study of oxytocin, sometimes called the compassion hormone, and its role in the bonding of mothers with their children, especially newborns. Since 1988, Dr. Post has been at the medical school at Case Western, where a Department of Bioethics was being created.
I was one of the early faculty members. It was exciting to come to a medical school and to be able to work with medical students, but most of my academic interest dealt with people with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Why? This is a very interesting question, because here you have people who are cognitively disabled. Their minds aren't working right. They've lost a lot of the temporal glue between past and present and future. They're living so much in the pure present. They may not remember who they are, they may not remember loved ones, but I still felt that many of them had a unique ability to actually give love and to respond to love. There was a man I met at a nursing home in 1989 when I was first here. He was deeply forgetful, really quite severely demented. And I walked up to him and he handed me a stick. And I took the stick in my hand and he smiled. And it was a very warm, loving smile. And if love was electric, the room would have been on fire. So I looked at him and I said, "Thank you," and I gave him back the stick. He couldn't understand a word I said. But I asked the nurse what had happened. And he said, well, when this gentleman was growing up on a farm in Ohio as a boy, he loved his father very, very much. And the one thing his father asked the boy to do every morning was to bring wood in for the fireplace. And that's what he was doing. Now that he was old and forgetful, he'd gone back to a time in his life, early in life, that he most associated with being loved. And here he was in this world of love, even though he was now 93 years old. So I became aware that in people with dementia or sometimes Down syndrome and mental retardation, they can oftentimes, even though their executive function in their mind, their ability to be thoughtful and to calculate and to keep track of things in life, even though that has terribly diminished, they have this kind of freedom to love in their own way. And not only are they able to love, but they very much respond to love. So it taught me that the most fundamental reality in human life is love.
During Stephen's college years, the field of ethnology, or animal behavior, was beginning. One of the first topics of study was altruism, how it evolved, and what are its limits. From this study, he derived a deeper understanding of human nature and the capacity of human beings for love, and for how logic tells us we are all equally significant as humans. We cannot separate out our spirituality, which somehow gives us a oneness in the universe. For him, biology, religion, and spirituality combine to help him to appreciate the accomplishments of people who are universally admired.
Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln, people who seem to have this profound compassion and empathy and love for others, who are relatively selfless. They're not self-destructive, but they're relatively selfless. They're free of self-preoccupation, and they seem to want to do so much, not just for their own group, religious or ethnic or national, but for all humanity, for a common humanity. And those are people, by the way, who are sometimes very threatening to individuals who actually are quite loving, but only toward those who are most like them. When you have a person like Gandhi, he was a threat to those who could only love Hindus, or those who could only love Muslims, or only love people like themselves. So it's these people who have this remarkably deep emotional outpouring toward everybody without exception, no matter what they've done in life, no matter what mistakes they've made. These people are the ones that we should be studying if we want to make for a better human future.
Dr. Post recognizes that people can be altruistic, can sacrifice and give of themselves to others for reasons other than love. If, as a rationalist philosopher like Immanuel Kant believes, we're all of equal worth, then the logic of altruism dictates that we should all be benevolent toward each other. But love goes beyond that as a profoundly emotional state or feeling, like the love a parent has for a child, the love among family members, love among friends, and even the love a doctor has for his patients. This kind of love provides a safe haven where people feel secure in the love of others. Those who give love so freely are the great benefactors of the world, neither demanding nor expecting anything in return. This giving of love is its own reward, and that is the paradox of love, and it is a part of every spiritual tradition.
But in the giving of self lies the unsought-for discovery of a deeper self. When you give to people, even though you're not intending it, you discover better relationships, more meaningful connections, higher purposes in life, but you also unlock this kind of biological and emotional state of care and connection, and it's a much, much healthier way of living than being caught up in hatred or fright or anxiety or jealousy or rage or resentment, rumination, unforgiveness. Those things all hurt us in every way imaginable. It's not just that they hurt other people, but they hurt us. And when we love people, of course, we're loving other people for the sake of loving them, but then paradoxically, as a kind of side effect, if you will, it's unintended, you know, we discover a deeper self. That's what Hinduism teaches. That's what Islam teaches. That's what Judaism teaches.
As love is a form of giving, Dr. Post believes that evil, all evil, is a form of destruction. Just as the word live spelled backwards is evil, Post believes evil is a form of murder, of the heart, of the soul, and of creativity that is no less real than murder of the body. Though not always intentional, our sometimes harsh or angry means of dealing with our children and with each other is a way that causes hurt, a way that we kill each other every day when we don't have to. And this evil, This power in human nature is deep and real, and the only answer to it is to cultivate love in the lives of those around us as well as in our own.
And so I think in human nature, part of the problem of evil is that on the one hand, we like to please those who are in authority. We like to elevate ourselves, if you will, in the pecking order, in the status world. We like to see ourselves promoted. And part of that is obeying the authorities around us. And then yet, we also have these compassion-based, these love-based inclinations. We see a person who's suffering, and ordinarily we empathize, we want to help them. We don't even have to think about it. You know, we just immediately and spontaneously help them, and that's defined very well by Dan Batson as the altruism empathy axis. It's very deep-seated in human nature. The problem is that it is inhibited, it is obscured, it is buried over, it is covered because of our will to please those who are above us. And that's why love requires courage. It really does. You cannot love well in this life without courage.
Dr. Post sees in our culture a pressure toward evil that is very difficult for children to fight, such as many song lyrics in contemporary music. Another great problem that children face in adolescence is the pressure to fit in, to be part of a group or clique. That often means excluding others who are not your friends, who are not in your clique. Such exclusion often invites abuse of those not considered worthy. But Dr. Post is optimistic, believing that all human beings are and need to be affirmed as worthy and equal, and not diminished or destroyed.
Studies indicate, and this is well demonstrated, that about 30 to 40% of adolescents really don't think of themselves in terms of peer image and in-group mentality. About 30–40% actually are asking themselves, how can I help humanity? What can I do with my life that will benefit the human species, the planet Earth, the future of life itself? And how can I tap into my talents to make that happen? So that's important, and those studies have been done cross-culturally and seem to be fairly consistent. So I don't think we need to be pessimistic about youth. I think youth are very promising. What we need to do is work with them, especially as mentors, because love isn't so much taught. You know, you don't teach love like you teach a lecture to students. Love isn't taught. Love is transmitted. I mean, it's passed on from one person to another.
Dr. Stephen Post believes that love provides countless emotional, spiritual, and physical benefits. In giving of oneself without expectation of return, he or she opens the door to security, health, and growth. The world's religious traditions, says Post, have a major role to play in the spread of compassion and care. By fostering humility and a sense of wonder, spirituality can help people reach beyond themselves to embrace the feelings and needs of others. Through his research, Dr. Post has found that empathy and altruism are among the most deeply rooted qualities in human nature.
Dr. Post believes that in spite of the differences between men and women, anatomically and hormonally, for instance, a kind of equality exists between men and women based on how they complement each other. For example, one parent may be a strong disciplinarian and the other a source of comfort for the child. To address that issue, he offers to speak from personal experience.
I have a daughter and I have a son. There's a bit of an age gap between them. More than a bit of an age gap, try 10 years. But I know that with my daughter, who's now more or less grown up, that there was a qualitative difference between my love for her and my wife's love for her. I think my wife played a little different role. The emotional dynamic of the relationships was different. And there's also a difference in the love that I have for my son, who's 12, and the love my wife has for him. It's just different. I relate to my son in ways that my wife doesn't, and vice versa. And he looks for certain things in me that he doesn't find in my wife, and vice versa, right? So I do think there are qualitative differences. To describe them is a little more complicated.
At its simplest, religion is organized spirituality by Dr. Post's definition. However, when it becomes routine and empty, it is no longer the spirituality that is a lively relationship to the believer's view of the ultimate reality. Dr. Post's personal experience of worship is a coming together in a religious framework of meaningful symbols and expectations in a community of support. That is what creates spirituality. He believes the key to the future of humanity is to enhance the spirituality of the religious traditions which play a major role in the cultures and lives of many billions of people.
Religion can bring out the best in people. It often does. It can bring out the worst in people. It often does. It can give rise to a Mother Teresa or a Rumi or an Abraham Heschel or a Dalai Lama. And on the other hand, it can give rise to incredible arrogance and even inflame hatreds. I am a big fan still of Reinhold Niebuhr, maybe the greatest 20th century American theologian. I would say so. And one thing Reinhold Niebuhr insisted on is that true spirituality, religion, and he didn't differentiate the two, depends on humility. The more deeply spiritual and religious we become, the more we realize how little we know. How little we know, and how much progress we need to make, and how seriously we need to take other people's viewpoints. Humility is what we lack. Mystery is another category in religion that I think we need to recover. Mystery about the ultimate nature of God. Mystery about the will of God.
Dr. Post is interested in knowing about the possibilities of unlimited love. Love that goes beyond the limits of family, class, race, nationality, and religion. He wants to know what science can teach us about such love. Even though it's an ancient subject, people have not seriously devoted study to unselfish love until recently. In the field of neuroscience, the emphasis has been on the study of the brain, but the focus has been not on love, but on fear, fight or flight, for example, because it is an easier emotion to study. Only recently have numerous brain studies focused on compassionate love, the love that begins with a mother caring for a newborn. This love is being studied in other areas as well. For example, it is also evident in Buddhist monks who seek to develop compassion through meditation and other practices. From these studies, we begin to get a sense of the physiology of love and the hormones associated with it, especially the state some call the care-connection axis and its biological and neurological properties.
We're also getting a lot of good information now about the health benefits of living a life of love. In fact, that's the focus of my book with Jill Nymark, a wonderful co-author, It's Good to Be Good. It even has a love and longevity scale, believe it or not, which is very well tested. As a generalization. More than 20 major studies in the last 5 years on mortality, on people dying, right? Usually focused on older adults, point out that people who were engaged in helping behavior, who were volunteers, not to be overwhelmed and stressed by that activity itself, but within reason, to be pro-social, to be involved in helping behaviors, seems to be very, very closely correlated with a longer life expectancy. Now, that's big news. In other words, it's good to be good. it seems to be the case that depression rates, anxiety are alleviated when we stop focusing so exclusively on me, myself, and I, and we just let go, just move on beyond self, which is what spiritual traditions say, by the way. Move on beyond myself and just go over to the others.
To Dr. Post, the essence of evil in the world is the most important challenge or obstacle to overcome facing the parent in relation to raising a child with love. Through empathy, attentive listening, and engaging with a child, even from a young age, we can be the kind of parents who create children of love.
One of the things that's come very clear in the literature is that when adults who are identified widely in their community as very loving and generous, when they look back on their childhoods, guess what? They say that their parents were not permissive. My mom, my father was not permissive, they say. They didn't just let me do anything. Do your own thing, right? But they weren't authoritarian. They weren't browbeating me. They weren't screaming all the time. They weren't emotionally crazy and nasty and hurtful. No, they were, though, authoritative. With great dignity, they were authoritative. They established in their own life an example of generous love toward friends and neighbors. In tit-for-tat theory, you enter into a relationship with your neighbor with the intent of doing good. Now, if the neighbor doesn't reciprocate, you may pull back for a while, but you still come back, eventually, to doing good for your neighbor. So it's not completely oblivious to reciprocation, but still, it's clear energy comes from this assumption, I will do good and entrust my neighbor. And modern-day versions of game theory, Martin Nowak at Harvard is probably the most significant scholar in this area, talk about how important in game theories forgiveness is, that if you forgive the non-reciprocator on 1/3 of occasions, just ignore the fact that they didn't give anything back to you and just continue to be good to them, you'll win the game.
Today, mathematicians use game theory to understand how people behave under certain conditions. And even in game theory, doing good is a big part of winning.
If you want to thrive, if you want to survive, if you want to live life well, as an individual, if you want as a nation, as a group, to live life well, love your neighbor. It's the best formula for success. In other words, it's good to be good.
In all his years of working with people challenged by Alzheimer's disease or other forms of mental impairment, Dr. Stephen Post has witnessed recurring phenomena. While severely limited in their ability to reason or calculate, these patients often have an overwhelming capacity to give and to receive love. Post believes that love is the foundation of human life. Through caring for others, we strengthen ourselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually. According to Dr. Post, all the religious traditions affirm enlightenment begins with learning to honor the needs of others. Thank you for watching our program. We hope you'll join us again as we continue to explore topics that intrigue the mind and touch the heart. From Matter and Beyond, I'm Laura Wells.